I'm Spenny. I'm one of the co-admins here. Longtime friend of Angie. I'm a regular top 1,000 player. Took Consume to top 500 2 seasons ago. So I can just talk about where Consume is right now, what its strengths are, what it struggles against. The main advantage of Consume is greed. It is the strongest point deck when everything is set up correctly, especially the current version that runs a decoy instead of summoning circle. It can produce upwards of 100 points and 3 cards in round 3, and you can just really blow out a lot of opponents that don't have a way to interact with your setup. Where it struggles are generally decks that have answers to your first 3 Neckers. That being like a Mandrake that's everywhere, a Coral, and maybe a Muzzle if they've teched it in. But unless they have answers to all of our Neckers, we're going to be able to set it up. And with the decoy, we're going to be able to get between 9 and 11 Neckers to work with. With that in mind, generally, when thinking about how to mulligan, we want to be very aggressive. We are a combo deck. We want to get to our good cards as quickly as possible. And since we're putting more bronze cards into our deck, we want to be very aggressive with our first mulligan. So we want to be blacklisting very efficiently with our Forktails, our Necker Warriors, Slizzards, if we have access to our Elzer's Double Cross and Marching Orders. We really want to set up a hand that ideally looks like a tutor for the first Necker Warrior, most likely Elzer's Double Cross, into 1 Vran Warrior, but access to actually all 3 of we generally win if we can at least get our combo down, and if they can answer 1 Necker and we thought we could get away with just blacklisting all the other ones, then we're kind of screwed from the first round. So we generally want to have access to all 3 Neckers if we could. And from there, we want to then have a couple Slizzards to take advantage of the Necker Warriors that we're putting in the graveyard. And then if we can have Decoy to put that extra 2 when it makes sense. Some matchups you don't really need that extra greed, and you can maybe save that for flexibility in using it on either your Marilorn or a Slizzard of some sort to pull out a combo piece that you need in a later round. It really is a good reactive tool based on your matchup. But so after talking about mulligan, talking about round 1, we can think about just the matchup and if we can get our combo down safely. If we have access to all 3 of our Neckers, we're just going to go in and disregard what our opponent is doing. We're just going to say, good luck building up hundreds of points. I'm going to be doing that better than you. So we're going to put our Necker down. We're going to put a Necker Warrior, get our Vran going, pull the Graveyard Chain with our Slizzards, and look to win round 1 ideally. But you don't necessarily have to. Say we've gotten our Neckers down, our deck is full of them, we've got our Vran going, but say we're playing against something like Brewer Coin Flip Abuse, and they've got a lot of elves down, they're getting something like 24 point bronzes, and we really can't keep up even if we start consuming. You can think about a pass in this situation. It really depends on if you can keep up after your combo's down. We do have ways to catch up with things like putting a monster's nest down into an Arrakis behemoth, getting our going. But generally in round one, our Neckers are pretty weak. We haven't gotten time for a lot of our consume to get going. So really, we are vulnerable to these decks that can put a lot of tempo out early. So we can think about passes when we're just too disparate in point total. And then in round two, you could just try to get as many consume triggers going, maybe consume a Necker when you have to keep up, but we just generate so many points that now that they're without their super powerful bronzes that they thought they could get us with in round one, they'll be kind of struggling to prevent us from getting a long round three, where consume is really only rivaled by Axeman. So don't be afraid to lose round one if the situation calls for it. But otherwise, decks that are also just slamming points, the armor deck right now, any of the Death Wish Dagon, just trying to slam points. And we just generally do that better. So in consume triggers going, use your Arrakis Queen. That's 3 consume triggers that we can get on all of our Neckers. Generally, just try to build those points as quickly as possible and as efficiently as possible so that when we actually transition into the later stages of the game, we're going to have a ton of points to work with. That's generally the strategy. We have a lot of flexibility in tutoring out the different important cards in our deck. We have a really powerful finisher with our Brewis ritual into Forktail, maybe a second Forktail. That's pretty much game over if you can ever hit that.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So you never use the queen for round 3, right? Especially if you so usually just round 1 or 2. I try to just third 2, but
in general, I want to get as many of the big consume effects as soon as possible after I've developed all of the Neckers. I want to get the Arrakis Queen, and if I happen to have a Forktail in my hand, I want to use those.
There could be an exception in that against Unseen Elder, but that's pretty rare anyway.
Unseen Elder, they only get one of them, and the thing is, up to 11 Neckers in our deck. So sometimes, it's the same idea with Scorch. They only get one generally. So you just say, wow, congratulations on your 40-point Scorch. I'm coming at you with 200 points, so good luck. So it doesn't... You don't have to get hung up on the one power card that really... that is really scary. The problem does come, though, they can maybe line up things for Scorch. They can somehow coordinate a large Scorch over multiple big units. That can lose you a game, especially if they're running Trettenberth and Scorch. That way you can't offset two discrepancies between your units. It depends on, but you can play around most of that. It comes down to math in some of those, where you know that you have different sets of Neckers offset by a point apiece. Can you time them so that they're all different? It can be tough to do, but it's definitely possible. So with the broad strokes of consume there, does anybody have any questions they'd like to ask?
Well, originally you were talking about round 3 in Brewis, but I had interrupted the question, so I wonder if you were going to continue.
Ideally we'd Brewis ritual and a few for round 3. That is by far the most powerful 3-card combo in the game. I
just thought I'd mention that Isha has a question in voice chat companion for afterwards.
Oh, voice chat companion, sure. Regarding Monster's Nest, sure. that's a good question. The Barbagazi is an option. I find myself rarely using it though. Really, it's used for a single and tempo on an already powerful necker. So if we've say got our entire combo down, we've used our Arrakis Queen, maybe even consumed one of our neckers with it, and we're down by maybe say 20 points to something we know we can keep tempo with, like an armor deck or Deathwish Dagon. Assume can get us some good points. We can get the 7 from the boosted Barbagazi, and then pull out maybe a 12, 13 point necker. That's plenty for keeping up with them. It's not really about the resilience at all. resilience at all. The consumed deck doesn't really care about card advantage. Maybe if you're facing a lot of decks with multiple Scorch effects, like a Villain Triton Mirth into a Scorch, you might care about it more. But one card is generally not going to win them the game. So I don't really need to think about setting up a situation where they'll be incentivized to play round 2 to maybe burn some cards and try to force an extra one out of me. If we can somehow get to round 3 with our combo, we've won. So we don't really need to think about being super greedy with the rest of our cards and thinking about these intermediate situations that actually use our neckers less efficiently than possible. I'd much rather use the Rack and then win round 1 with great tempo with the rest of our consume effects, and not even really worry about a round 2 scenario. I'd rather even win just so I can guarantee access to the full combo in round 3. Does that answer your question? Yeah, no problem. Thank you for the question. Does anybody else have anything they'd like to ask?
What are your tips on, in terms of sequencing for playing around Scorch effects and Gigni effects? Like, when should I use Arrakis Queen? When should I use Slyzards to stagger neckers?
That's a great question. So, Arrakis Queen, I'm trying to use as soon as possible round 1 after I've set up necker chain. So generally that's going to be like mid-20s on points, 25, maybe 28, something like that. So that's a Scorch or Igni I'd be very much okay with them taking. Really, the Scorches that win them the game have to be in like the 90 point range. They have to be lining up 2 large Forktails in round 3. They need to be generally lining up a lot of different things. Igni is less concerned for those reasons because they're generally just going to get like 1 large target. They'll get like a 40-point Igni swing. Very nice for them, but end of the day, it doesn't really matter. We just have too many points. Where it could matter, though, is if you're facing some very heavily teched great sword list with Igni and Coral. That can be enough points sometimes. They'll get a 40-point Igni swing and then another 40-point Coral swing. And now, when paired with their large greatsword res, we don't really have much interaction. In those situations, if you face a lot of greatswords in general, you can consider replacing the decoy, which in consume, for maybe an Osril. Another great point play in general, but against greatsword can be just flat out winning, especially if we can go first in round 3.
So you wouldn't replace, say, the Monster Nest with an Osril?
No, Monster Nest is super flexible. It has the main choice of Arrakis Behemoth for tempo, or for an extra consume effect immediately. or even the ghoul if we've run out of options. Say a top deck round 3, we can just consume our last Necker Warrior for a 14-point play. It's really, its strength is in its flexibility, and that it can be tutored from the
Tribute.
Tribute. It can be tutored from that. So it really, I don't think, if anything, that Monster's Nest would be on the cutting block. I really think Decoy, since you can't tutor it out, it's kind of situational, isn't always needed, but provides that serious upside, is probably the one I would consider cutting for an Ozrel. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. Also, like, what are the other kind of tech cards in Consume? Or obviously, it's a bit of a binary deck, so you don't really take. Or maybe the sleeper cards. Like, what are we going to see?
Oh,
in
yeah.
terms of Consume with maybe some new golds or new silvers. You know what I mean?
New gold, silvers. I would say the biggest sleeper card in the list is Mandrake. It's your most flexible answer. An underutilized part of it is actually the heal and strengthen effect of it, facing something like Aridin Frost or Henselt machines that have maybe got it down to a couple hit points. You can use your Mandrake to heal up your that Necker so that it is out of the range of a lot of their machines or weather effects, whatever. And then you can just continue on with your combo without them killing a lot of your setup. That's when we're most vulnerable, when all of our Neckers are very weak. And if we can strengthen that first one with Mandrake, then we've bypassed a lot of those problems. I'd say that's probably the most underrated card, and of course, it always answers the other powerful strategies out there, like an Imlerith that was boosted somehow, or whatever boosted card of choice you'd just like to get out of here. I'm done with you. That is probably my underrated card of Consume. The single really great control option. As far as new stuff, there really isn't. There really aren't many new components that have been added that fit with the strategy. We're just trying to get as many points for our round 3 while still being flexible. I think as far as like the new 10 golds that got released, I think you could potentially consider something like Dandelion Poet for the extra card draw, but I think the ones that are in there are generally better. Like Royal Decree just does the tutoring option better, just being able to actually pick in the moment what card we want. Phoenix is great because of all of the Draconid synergy, being able to pull out another Slizzard if we need to pull something, get another Consume trigger. And then both of the Brewesses for tutoring the Neckers or the other silvers. I think the golds are actually very tight right now. Other thing looking for in the future, so like say the next set, if there were cards that helped me protect my initial setup better, I'd be very interested in knowing what those were. Because I think the deck already really succeeds in point generation, but if we can somehow get access to maybe a new silver that did our Neckers, I don't know what that would look like, but that would be something to think about.
Like a Quenifex kind of thing?
Yeah, that would be amazing. If you could somehow, when your Neckers are already played and or one on the field, and have the rest of them get the Quenifex, that would be the best. I would replace. There's definitely something, probably a decoy. Yeah. So then we become truly uninteractive. We become the solitaire deck of dreams, where we're just smashing points and not really caring about what anybody else wants to do. That would be kind of ridiculous. So yeah. So generally, long story short, nothing new right now that would benefit it, but there could be something in the future. And it would really be revolving around protecting our initial stages of the combo. Thanks for the question. Anybody else have something they'd like to ask?
Well, do you have any advice on like the Death Wish archetype? Is that even a good archetype to use anymore?
Definitely.
It's a great archetype. Rabble, I think you wanted to talk about this, right?
I mean, I can talk about Death Wish.
Yeah. So my main specialty is consume. I'd be able to hit the broad strokes of Death Wish, but I think Rabble could do it for you as well.
Okay. My other question is that, well, when running Death Wish decks, is it just better that I just keep Dimeridium Shackles anyway in the deck, because too many times have Archosaurs been locked?
Generally speaking, Dimeridium Shackles doesn't tend to be a very good.
Yeah, I know, but it's just like too many times I get locked.
Often it's the case of, if you think of it this way, let's just say they play an 8-point card that needs to be locked, like let's say in this case a Greatsword. Then essentially you're just playing a bronze, which is 4 points less than their bronze.
Are you saying your Death Wish stuff is getting locked?
I believe she meant that she had more lock targets than she needed.
Yeah, well, something like that, but usually it's just what I used to do is just I would put the Dimeridium Shackles in there so that if I occasionally had Blessed RNG, it would unlock my locked Archosaurs or the Rot Fiends.
Generally speaking, it's not usually worth unlocking your own things, but using locks offensively instead.
There are also some better counters to lock, like Decoy, for instance, which works well sometimes in Death Wish, I guess.
If you want a lock in monsters, it would have to be Morvud.
I mean, he's like the best.
Morvud
lock.
is actually a very solid lock.
He resets too.
So does that answer your question on...
Yeah, it does, thank you. Let's see. I had another question on Death Wish, but I forgot. So it'll come back to me eventually.
Yeah, you can always reach out to us if you realize something later.
Okay. Aisha is still writing in the voice chat companion.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I didn't see it.
Yeah, damn
it. You were seeing an old message.
I was like seeing her typing away. I was like, huh, maybe we should address that. But it's just wait.
Yeah, if anyone's interested in Moonlight or Death Wish, I can talk about it a bit.
Yeah, why don't you talk about Death Wish?
Oh, Death Wish.
Yeah.
So where do I start? Let me just get up a Death Wish deck. So give me... Alright, so Death Wish, generally your sort of like core golds will usually it's Wispesh Tribute and Brewess Ritual, and then normally the other two are fairly flexible. Often you'll probably want to run Geels, and in the current meta, I would probably suggest Caretaker as the other gold slot, due to the fact that it's particularly useful if you can steal at least one fairly boosted like Greatsword or Jenge threat from like say Greatsword, which are a particularly common adversary on the ladder. Often the general synergy in the deck is that you use the Griffins on your DAOs for big tempo swings and a lot of value. And your units are generally hard to remove because DAO is a 6-point card that, of course, plays 2 4s when it dies. Griffin, of course, triggers the death rattle effect. Worst case scenario, you can use the Griffin on an Archer Spore, but it's really preferable to use it on a DAO most of the time. Unless you know your opponent's going to have some form of AoE that could be really bad for you.
Like Ragnarok.
Well, Ragnarok isn't that bad. You just need to be careful about not playing on too many rows. Preferably 2, usually. You know, because then when you start to play on the 3rd row, then all of a sudden you have no weather clears because, generally speaking,
Then that's when I use red.
a buyer is not very good, really. So you don't tend to run weather clear in Death Wish, which of course makes you very vulnerable to weather. So you don't really want to play on free rows to give them full value. Sometimes you might want to run She-Troll, depending on your deck variant. But usually when you're running She-Troll, you'll often be running, call them now, Rot Fiends. You know, because she will, of course, pull the Rot Fiend and activate its Death Wish immediately. And then worst case scenario, you can use it to eat it down and trigger its Death Wish. Ideally, in most cases, except perhaps Great Swords, you want to have your just early as possible in most cases, due to the fact that, of course, there are engine ticks. And, you know, so every turn, they're getting you 1 point, 1 point, 1 point. So after about 5 turns or so, you know, all of a sudden they're a 12-point value. Are there any questions about Death Wish?
My main issue that I've been having with it is a lack of power when it comes to the end game. Excuse me,
Yeah.
sorry. I think I'm either finding it difficult to know when to pass in round 2 so that I know which cards I have left over in order to actually have a decent finisher, or
In the
often it
context
feels
of
like there is no good finisher.
often your finisher will generally be either sort of like a Brewess trigger, like a Griffin or a Cyclops, or it'll be something like Caretaker or Tribute. But of course, sometimes you do use Tribute earlier on, you know, when a good Mandrake opportunity presents itself. So it is quite a tricky deck to master, but it does have quite a bit of removal value. It's just a general good all-round deck.
It sounds like the
the,
idea then is to have quite a long round 3 in order to have the maximum number, or not 3 and 3, because you're probably going to have to use one or the other sooner,
Just
but
some
as a number of Dows and Griffins left over somehow, either from the graveyard or from hand.
It certainly does benefit from long rounds, but not as much as some decks. Sometimes it depends, you know, it's more flexible in terms of, you know, how long you can go in a round. Usually it requires a bit of setup though, because even though it has a lot of value, you know, usually like playing a Dow, for example, from hand, you're just playing 6 points, which is very low tempo. So you've also got to be careful with the Dows, not, shall we say, play too low a tempo play, because sometimes that can be really bad because it enables your opponent to have an easy pass. And giving your opponent an easy pass is never usually very good in most cases. But of course, when it gets going, you've got ticks from the Archer Spores, you've got the almighty power of the group. Often you'll find that people tend to Mandrake Dowls nowadays. So I would actually suggest running free if you're not running an overdeck. But of course, it's optional, depending on the specific deck you're using. I would also suggest Osril quite heavily as well nowadays. You know, due to, again, great swords being quite present.
I was gonna ask, well, what are the recommended silvers for Death Wish versus versus Moonlight?
So for Death Wish, assuming you're running Wispesh Tribute, you'll of course want Monster's Nest and Mandrake, since that's sort of her combo. You always want Mayrelon. If Death Wish deck, you need Mayrelon. You know, he's basically one of the best cards you can have. It's a 4 that pulls a Death Wish unit of your choice out of your deck, which is incredible. If you're not running Woodland Spirit, then you run Vader Maker. You know, because you have to have one or the other. There's no in between, really. You ideally want like the 2 Finning, you know, for the Foglets, and the 2 weather effects, because that's usually the optimal number. Because normally you say play one weather effect in round 1, like Dagon, and then let's say they can potentially weather clear it, and if you're confident that it wasn't clear and that they don't have any more weather clear, then you can potentially Vader Maker situationally, or Woodland Spirit, for the second fog. But that depends a lot on what type of deck they're running. But generally speaking, you'll often want to play one fog effect round 1, and then you'll want to have a fog effect in round 3. Because then it plays around weather clear as best as possible. Because nothing's really particularly better for them than you playing both your fog effects round 1 and then just immediately clearing it all with a Silver Mage. But you might know that they don't tend to run weather clears. Like, quite a lot of the time you'll find that something like Alchemy doesn't run weather clears. So you can, significantly outvalue them via that. Frighteners, of course, almost a given. Just simply due to the fact that even though it's the worst silver spy out of, all the CA spies, due to the fact that it doesn't give you a choice on what you want to pull. Even then, it's very important, because if your opponent, say, plays a CA spy and you didn't win round 1, then you're basically doomed. In most cases, obviously you can potentially outvalue them, but in most cases, a good player managed to get their CA spy off, and you haven't got yours, then you probably lost. And if you're running Woodland Spirit instead of Vader Maker, then you'd probably want to run something like She-Troll, or perhaps orders to pull your Slizzards. You probably won't have enough room for Morvud if, the case of you running Tribute. There is, of course, one personal slight more fun, my little experimental deck that I made a while back with a Relic Deathwish deck. In that.
That sounds cool.
We're not.
But yeah, hopefully that answers your question.
It does. Well, I was going to ask if you would explain more on Moonlight now, since we've...
Moonlight. That's actually... If you're not going to be playing Consume in this current meta, I would actually recommend Moonlight instead of Deathwish. My reasoning behind that is because Moonlight performs really quite admirably against Alchemy. It's not to say it can't lose against Alchemy, but due to the werewolves, to the Viper Witches, and the Sirens being rather low and base strength, makes it so that you can play around their damage quite well, making them have quite awkward hands. With a Moonlight deck, you want to be really careful with your mulligans. You can't be very greedy or aggressively mulligan in most cases, because if you're running, say, Wispesh Tribute, for example, you'll probably be running Wispesh Tribute, but of course Wispesh Tribute only has 2 targets in the form of Monster's Nest and Mandrake, which makes her a little bit tricky sometimes if you get bad mulligans. And of course you have 3 Moonlights, and so you can see there are a lot of brick potential there. So you have to be really careful with your mulligans. Basically getting the stuff out your hand that you don't want, like the Foglets, the Moonlights, and potentially, of course, the Monster's Nest or Mandrake, depending on the matchup, if you draw both of them, in the opening hand. And usually you use something like Ancient Foglets, for example, in Moonlight. I much prefer these to the Alpha Werewolves. The reasoning behind is you have 2 fog effects, of course, in the form of Dagon and either Vadermaker or Woodland Spirit. And so, by running the Ancient Foglets, when you place them on the board, because their effect is on turn end, they'll start as an 11-point card, and keep going up by 1 each turn. And of course, 11 is in an awkward place for example, Viper Witches to remove. They can't remove an 11-point card easily. They won't get rid of its on-board effect, if you will. Very good for us, of course. Whereas Alpha Werewolf is an immediate 12 points if you have a Moonlight effect, and it does help stagger the Moonlight. But generally, this isn't so important, and you can find that they just end up being very low value, and because they're only better in theory against alchemy, the Alpha Werewolves, but for an improvement against one matchup isn't worth it when you can simply be better against every other matchup you go up against, which is why the Ancient Foglets are there. I do run Muzzle because the potential for you being able to steal that back from alchemy via using a fog effect is quite effective. And what else? The Sirens, in most cases, you want to use them for just a flat-out Moonlight. You don't want to use Blood Moon. You only want to use Blood Moon, rarely, on a long round if, say, you have one spare in hand. Then you can potentially get quite a lot of value. But the huge weakness of Blood Moon is the second your opponent plays a Clear Skies from, say, a Silver Mage, then they've essentially just completely undone your Blood Moon effect. Essentially, making it like a Lacerate that's instantly healed for full. And also even weaker in most cases. What else is there to talk about Moonlight? Often, of course, you have like another silver slot, other than because you don't tend to run Mayrelon in Moonlight for obvious reasons. So then generally you'd probably want to put in either something such as Morvud or Nekarat. Nekarat can be very useful in helping you find an extra Moonlight effect. And due to the fact that it's not actually in your deck, it means that it can't add another brick to your deck, unlike the Sirens. But if, say, your opponent runs Weather, then it can be very useful in helping counteract said Weather. But it is generally low points overall. So it's a tricky one, but either Nekarat or Morvud should do fine. Which makes it it actually has quite a lot of enemy board interaction when you include things like Muzzle, Tribute, Morvud, and of course it has interactions with the graveyard too, if you include, say, Caretaker and Ozril. Are there any questions?
Well,
Wishing, it sounds like you're
is it
underwater.
possible to do a Moonlight Nova deck, but other than that, I meant like recommended golds for Moonlight, other than like
My personal recommendations, at least at the moment, would be Wispesh Tribute, Caretaker, Heals, and Muzzle.
okay.
Because the deck, due to the fact that Great Swords and the likes are quite affluent, Caretaker becomes fairly useful in, being able to steal said 16-point Great Swords in round 2. And Muzzle, of course, is always a good card in, stealing your opponent's engines and the likes. You can even potentially, of course, steal your opponent's greatswords even. Like a low... once they've been hit once by a long ship, you can steal a wounded 7-point greatsword, and then it'll be a 10-point once its ability triggers on your side, which can be quite useful. So those are the golds that I run currently for Moonlight. Alternatively, you can of course run Woodland Spirit, say, instead of Muzzle, or instead of Caretaker, depending on the meta. I do find that Grave Hate is quite effective at the moment.
Thanks for that, by the way.
What was that, sorry?
Thanks for answering the question regarding Moonlight, because I have like that is probably I still had trouble with Moonlight, so I wanted to be able to properly use the archetype.
It is quite a tricky deck type to play, particularly due to the mulligans. That's probably the hardest part about the deck. Due to the 2 Foglets, 3 Moonlights, and usually a Monster's Nest or Mandrake. And oh yes, didn't you mention something about Nova?
I did, but I don't know how like practical it is to run it like a Nova's Monsters deck to begin with.
I
had
would
maybe,
say
like-
that it would make the deck significantly worse, at least in my opinion. I would say that due to the fact that it limits you on Sirens and Werewolves, which are generally your stronger bronzes. And generally your power comes from your Moonlight ticks.
I'm assuming we're talking about Moon right now,
Yeah.
but as a whole, I think that Nova is not the greatest of ideas in most Monsters decks. Because Monsters has pretty crappy thinning.
I used her once in like very, very old Monsters deck. This is before Nova got like nerfed to 22. I don't know.
Like,
it was a very weird deck.
Monsters decks just have really shitty thinning in general, which means that
Yeah.
having Nova just limits you so much more than other
Tepe
factions.
is not wrong in that they do really struggle with thinning.
Yeah.
Like, your tutor is Slizzard, and in Deathwish, Nova's okay because you're constantly throwing things into your graveyard, but Slizzard breaks a lot in other matchups, and in other decks that aren't Deathwish.
Fortunately,
You can still-
Moonlight does actually thin much better than most Monsters
Archetypes.
decks, such as Deathwish,
Yeah.
due to having, the 2 fins from the Foglets, the 3 fins from the Moonlights, the 2 fins from the Recons, and and of course the 1 fin from Tribute, potentially. Which gives you a lot of thinning, but the downside is it gives you a lot of brick potential. So it's a double-edged sword.
I think like 6 or 7 bricks is pretty manageable. Because
It is fairly manageable. It's just
like-
quite difficult. You've got to be careful.
like there are very few games that are decided by drawing all 3 Moonlights and Foglets in one hand, or all 3 Moonlights and 2 Foglets in one hand, in my opinion. So I think it should be fine.
I have a general. I don't know what's wrong with my voice this evening.
Yeah,
I have a
it's-
general question about the general viability, because we've been talking about Consume and particularly Moonlight. I know they would be the preferable options at the moment. At least where I am right now, I am not seeing either of those archetypes at all.
Yeah, Monsters archetypes, you won't find that a lot of people play said archetypes. At least not at the moment.
Yeah, they're not quite as flexible as a lot of the other decks in the meta. Like Consume, for example, is very hurt by the presence of Mandrake being in pretty much every deck. And if we somehow brick our opener to where we can't have access to the rest of our important cards, then we can just lose because of that. It operates on that thin razor edge of, can we safely execute our strategy? It's tough, but yeah, monsters are just in a kind of a tough spot right now.
I would say that honestly, probably your best choice would actually be Consume if you're looking for a monsters deck at the moment. I would say that they're generally in the best spot because no one ever expects them, and they're always generally greedy.
Except people who run triple scorch
Not sure what that was. Wishing, yeah, Mike.
Something
Sounds like
about
you're
running
underwater.
multiple Scorches in Scoia'tael.
I just heard the word triple scorch and like my balls just went inside my body,
God.
just jumped up. Oh,
But
I think that
I mean, great swords do tend to run. I've noticed quite a few of them running both muzzle, coral, and of course mandrake. So that can be potentially very dooming for any consume players at the moment.
I'm sorry for bringing up the triple storytell as a counter to consume because I've done that many times against monster players, and I'm like, there's Ethna, there's Shiru, and a scorching hand.
is your mic plugged in properly?
I'm not sure it
I'm
is.
not sure. I don't know what's going on with my mic, to be honest. But I'm not away from it, so
Yeah, the volume is fine. It's just like distorted.
It sounds like you're underwater.
Yeah, it sounds like you've got a bag over or something. I don't know.
no, there's nothing on it. So I don't know.
Okay.
I would say that one of the reasons, particularly why things are so difficult right now, is due to the large presence of greatswords. That's why you generally try tech against them as best as possible to increase the likelihood that you succeed. By using, say, Osral, which can
Yeah.
potentially find large value if you let them build up their greatswords. Are there any more questions? I guess that's a no. Is there anything you'd like to add, Donny?
No, I think we've pretty much covered most of the basics. I think that was a pretty good intro to what different archetypes of monsters look like. Yeah, I think we've covered a lot. Oh, it looks like Aisha asked a question. Swarm. Yeah, Swarm Consume is just generally a little bit weaker than its peers right now. It struggles against a lot of the high point, high tempo decks, which there are a lot of right now. So something that you're doing wrong. It's just really an archetype problem. There aren't really a lot of tools for the archetype right now.
I like how we've not covered
Eridan.
Eridan at all.
Oh, we could talk about Eridan a little bit.
I mean, I can talk about him a little
Yeah,
bit.
It's certainly something I don't know about everyone else. It's certainly something I'm interested in, but I cannot possibly find a way to put a good deck together for it somehow that has the finishing power across all 3 rounds.
Eridan needs Nova at the moment. There's no other way to
Yeah.
build it.
He does. I will concede this. I guess me and Donny will share some decks, of like each archetype. So you have like a general idea on what they should look like from a competitive standpoint.
Yeah, I'll post my Deathwish deck here in a little bit. I'll post it in the Crookback Bog faction chat room.
Ironically, Eridan plays actually kind of similar to the Moonlight deck, but it is more vulnerable to alchemy.
It's the thing with monsters though, like apart from Consume, all the monster decks are the same in that they have like these cards which are actually kind of bad, but when you put them together, you can play for like this long round and like you'll win because you have more tools in the long round than anyone else. But like none of your cards are actually good,
I mean, Eridan Nova kind of you kind of need to draw Siri Nova ideally or Iris to get the value. That's the tricky part. But generally speaking, you'll probably want to use Eridan for either occasionally you'll use him for like an extra Wild Hunt Rider to get the extra damage on the Frost. But no to use him for is the 3-point what do you call it again? The is often what you'll want to use him for. Because then he plays as a 5-point that plays a 3-point that'll play either an extra Wild Hunt Hound or an extra Wild Hunt Rider. Which helps spin down the deck.
The only Eridan decks I've encountered in Worlds recently is just They don't even use the navigator. They just pull another hound so that Aridin.
Oh, Isha's got a question for you, Dunny, in the voice chat companion.
That's what I was talking about. Her swarm consume thing with finisher. It wasn't really her fault. It's really just it doesn't have a lot of support right now. You have your Arrakis behemoths pulling the what are the 3 units?
I think I just missed the text to go with
it.
it.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, is there anything else you'd like to cover?
I don't think we've got anything left to cover other than sort of sharing the deck lists, and then, you know, maybe someone would like to comment on one of them.
Yeah, I've mainly been using the variant of Kara's Consume. See if I could find that for you guys.
I guess we just put them in request a mentor, I guess. Not sure there's
Crookback Bog might be the best place.
It's probably even better.
Yeah, so I'm posting in Crookback Bog a link to the GwentDB of Kara's Consume. The main difference is he uses Osroll and I use Decoy. But really, that whole slot is flexible for what you're facing at the given time. If you're facing a lot of greatswords, keep an Osroll. If you're facing other point slam decks like Handbuff, Nilfgaard, or Scoia'tael, you can go the Decoy route. I
would suggest Osroll, at least when you base it on the GwentDB and just general experience. There's a lot of great swords.
Yeah, there is a lot of great swords. So the Osroll could be the best option right now. It's definitely just a solid value play.
Everyone keeps talking about how much of a problem all of the repetitive decks are. You know, so many great swords, so many Henselt machines. I don't know whether it's just my corner of the 3.3k ladder. No one is playing this stuff.
Yeah,
it's all really random. Like occasionally there's an Imlerith deck that drives me insane. Come across an actual meta deck. I think at this point in the season, most people have just given up and are trying to find something fun to do, and they're still kicking my ass.
I don't know.
You mean like
it's really weird with games. It's like some people who are maybe not so into the competitive side, they just like go onto Twitch and they watch some streamers and they think like, okay, this streamer is playing, I don't know, like they watch Oceanwood or something and he's playing Eridin, so therefore Eridin must be the best deck. I'm going to make an Eridin deck. And then they bring it into 3.3k or whatever, and they get beat by anyone who actually knows how to choose what deck. People just like, GwentDB is a great resource, but like so many people you'll come across on ladder don't use it until you come up until like, you know, rank 20, rank 21, when almost everyone uses it, you know?
The way I suggest to use GwentDB is to give you ideas. And then if you're not too sure about whether or not it's good, so to speak, what you've come up with based on it, then you consult a more experienced player. Often you'll find them in their respective chat rooms. Like, for example, if you're playing in our academy, for example, our monsters often I'll be there to help.
And if you see a deck made by Krupa, just ignore it.
Yeah.
It's not real. It's all fake.
It'll probably be a meme.
It's a hallucination.
Please repeat all of that.
Yeah, I can't really hear you.
Better?
Still kind of.
It might just be easier.
Yeah, it's still
for me
a little
to
muffled.
Print screen my. I'll just print screen them. I was just like typing them out into deck forever.
Of course you are.
Well, there's no rush, is there? The chat's not going anywhere.
It's true. I mean, it'll take 2 screenshots. That's not that bad.
So I'm looking at this Kara Consume Once again, I find myself in the problematic case of this is why I don't net deck. I don't have all of the cards. I'm looking at Phoenix. I'm missing Phoenix, and I'm looking at the gold cards I have available to me because I don't have. I guess actually, Karen doesn't see that much play anymore. But I'm struggling to find what the fourth gold should be after Royal Decree, Ritual, and Tribute, which are all pretty obvious. You said earlier that the gold slots are pretty tight. Is that just assuming that Phoenix is a thing, or
it really
is there another obvious option that I am too blind to see?
Phoenix was a huge addition for Consume. The main thing is that it gives you flexibility. You can pull a Forktail, Vran Warrior, or Slizzard from it, depending on what you need. And that flexibility, especially as we get to a short round 3, is really valuable. So I think that having Phoenix should be your first crafting priority. You can include something like a Karen in the meantime. You'll lose significant flexibility and probably win rate because of it, but it can be played without, for sure.
Do you have a muzzle in your collection?
I do.
My advice, and so you can craft Phoenix, would be to take out Royal Decree for Gales and put in a muzzle instead of the Phoenix.
That's fair.
That'll kind of be a stopgap until you get there.
I don't know about Gales.
You'll need it to unbreak the Royal Decree because it can't pull muzzle.
Yeah, that's possible.
It's
It would
like
require
Warriors
some
is good.
testing.
I mean, I've been playing Gales in my Consume decks for, a
Okay.
long time.
I'll take your word for it.
It works. It's a little bit more consistent.
I put the Moonlight deck I've been using at the moment, and Jon Snow's Death Wish, and the Nova Eredin list. So if you have any questions about those, ask away.
This is where I get to shout at you for your stupid decks. Where are they again?
Crookback Ball.
Oh.
And I'm guessing that nobody's probably interested in relicts.
Unless they build
look
an
alright, actually.
archetype around it, then
I mean, I have a fairly decent relict Nova deck, but I'm pretty sure Kara would permaban me if I.
So in relics, are crones a trap? Or...
Mostly, yeah. I mean, competitively speaking, yes. Which is kind of funny when you think about it. So, for example, what I would use for relicts, ironically, is Death Wish. If that sounds... So, I mean, if anyone wants the link, I'll put it in the, what's it called? But it's the same one that I've used a while ago. But the principle of the deck is that you can use incantation to pull relicts. It's basically like pull a relic and strengthen it by 2. Pull a relic. And with Death Wish, of course, what a lot of people don't know is that Mayrelon is a relict. And
right.
oh, I forgot about that.
And so there's a very high chance, well, it significantly increases your chance that you draw him, and he is, of course, very good. And so a 6 playing, say, a 7, such as Archer Spore, kind of helps you get started a lot on round 1, which often Death Wish decks struggle on initial tempo. But worst case scenario, you can always pull and strengthen a Fiend, which will, and be a 13 pulls to eat. I mean, I'll show you the list. It might help.
Is it actually competitive?
I would say yes, actually. As strange as it sounds.
Don't spend your well-earned scraps on his crap.
Well, if
Sorry.
you don't have incantation, I wouldn't suggest crafting it.
I don't, so I won't. But I'm curious because again, it's another one. It's another one of those archetypes that I wish had a little more love, because it's interesting just on the the pure. It sounds
Like, on
different,
the concept
you know.
alone.
Yeah, exactly.
It's kind of weird though, because in the kind of office tour that Berger did during the League Open,
Yeah.
he talks about like balancing factions, and their
Yeah.
goal is to like make free archetypes viable
faction.
competitively in each faction. Well, if you count up the ones in Monsters, like Relics is the one that's like never gonna be competitive, you know? It's the one that's gonna get left out.
Mm.
So I'm
Feels
pretty
bad,
sure
man.
like what we see is what we get with it, you know? Unless something changes majorly, it's gonna stay pretty.
This isn't really a question, but more like speculation for monsters, especially with the upcoming vampire meta. A lot of people are speculating that it's going to be even more stuff for Moonlight now, but nobody knows.
I mean, there's a decent chance that if the vampires are good, it could actually boost Moonlight into like tier 2, tier 1.
Return of the Elder, the Unseen Elder.
Probably not unless he gets changed.
No.
I
It'll probably
imagine
still be
I
James.
imagine that would probably be one of the first changes they make.
Well, I think
I
the
suspect.
I think the chances is if whenever they do release the vampires, they're gonna also release Detloff as the leader, since they confirmed forever ago that Detloff and Anna Henrietta will be new leader cards.
They said he's not going to be a leader, actually.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh,
Well,
okay. Because
when someone on Reddit said
when they first announced
something about
it.
him being a leader, Berger replied, "Who said he's going to be a leader?" So.
Ooh. And gaming companies say things and then change their minds all the time. So don't get
that's
excited.
True. That's true. Yeah.
But I suspect the vampire archetype is going to be focused around Drain than Moonlight.
Yeah.
But vampires are good. Moonlight's better than it is now. So we'll see.
Lux is just noticing. On that deck, I just added Pro on the end. It's because I was using it for quite a bit in on the Pro ladder. I actually got pretty good stats with it back in the day, but I've not played on.
When does this season end? It's 29th, right?
Sorry.
Gesundheit.
I'll show you proof that it did well on the Pro ladder.
Is it so close?
It's like
Yes, March 29th at 10 a.m. European summertime. Central European summertime.
I can't be bothered to grind for Grandmaster this season, I think.
There's your
I'm
proof
just gonna
that
get the Rogue
the
Saboteur.
Relic Deathwish Nova Pro deck is actually fairly solid on a competitive basis.
That's not very many
I'm
games.
sorry, Elvin Scum Nova? What? What? And then I am Sadness?
I mean, note how the
Mia?
deck called I Am Sadness has 0
Me and no units on my side. Looking at all these superior deck names. I hate Graves Moonlight.
I even have a deck that's literally named Finish Him Mannequin.
Oh god.
Yeah, sometimes I get creative with the names.
Amazing.
I guess I have my homework for the beginning of next season, at least. Play all of the Death Wish and all of the Consume decks.
Best of luck.
The thing is, Isha, I don't know whether they can avoid that. If they're going to base it on Drain, it kind of has to be boosting point slamming. Otherwise, Drain doesn't make any sense, unless it's redesigned.
Might be.
Oh, for the vampire. The
I
speculation
mean, it wouldn't
for
be that
vampires.
surprising. Drained by a quarter of a unit strength.
I mean, it's like there's so little vampires already. You can like count on my hands the amount of vampires. But still, I think the reason I suggested Moonlight to begin with is the fact that the Necrorat is the only one that pulls it. So it made me wonder if they're gonna go somewhere with that, like Moonlight Drain type thing. I have no idea. how it'll possibly work.
Making Blood Moon actually useful would be nice.
Yeah. That could also work with Vampire Synergy somehow. It's like, if under Blood Moon, it's kind of like how the Werecat card, you do damage, and then you do damage to everything under Blood Moon. So then, if vampires do more damage under Blood Moon, then, or drain more if there's Blood Moon on the other side of the board. Not sure.
If
how
you're
that would
running
work.
into a lot of alchemy, though, like, the
Yeah.
Moon deck is really good.
Yeah.
And, a way of avoiding really boring alchemy mirror matches.
Yeah. I'm not even gonna touch Nilfgaard now.
Different topic, different day.
Yep. Different day.
Mwahahaha.
Man.
Praise be to the great sun.
I worked hard for that border during the first faction war with that. Man. I'll eventually get the monsters border.
Oh yes, so with regards of, like, if you're struggling to find cards for, monsters decks, you can always just ask in the Crookback Bog, and I will probably help you with I'm not too experienced with Consume, you might have to or Dunny for that, but any of the other archetypes like Death Wish or,
Yeah, we'll be glad to help out. Just reach out.
we should be able to make a fairly optimal deck for what cards you do have.
I'm definitely going to keep in mind if I do end up trying the Death Wish again. I think one of the issues I had was that I was a little trigger happy with the fog effects. So I'm definitely going to try and keep in mind that play one in round 1 and one in round 3.
Yeah.
One.
So-
I guess if you're running, sorry.
Sorry.
There's
You
one
go.
thing that all monster decks have in common. It's all about resource management. Like, you have a limited amount of effects that are really important to you. You need to figure out when they're going to be most effective, what you can save, what you have to use early.
Alright, let's let Lafari.
No, I was going to say wishing should go first.
Oh,
Oh,
I was just gonna say that
okay.
utilize the Crookback Bog faction chat when making monster decks in the future, since it's not my most played faction, but I still play it more than I do Skellige. So I would like to get better with this faction.
Like, I'm fairly active a lot and generally fairly experienced with monsters. How many wins do I even have? Not checked.
What I was also gonna say is that I agreed with Aisha in terms of I really hope that when the vampires do get released, that it's an interesting archetype and not like Point Slam.
Yeah, they've learned their lesson. Sure.
They also did say that they were going to be adding a wild hunt unit or two. So actually, we could potentially see the Eredin actually rise quite a bit if they're actually any good. The cards, that is.
Yeah.
Because the sort of why, of course, Eredin isn't particularly good is because he's fixed into an archetype. Like, he can't really be used outside a wild hunt due to the way his ability, works. But he's not actually a bad leader per se. He's a 5-player free, take a bronze out of your deck, which is basically, if you would think about it, it's kind of Dagon in a way.
Eredin Consume hybrid decks have existed and been very competitive in the past, and they just ran Wild and Hounds, Frost, Eredin, and then a Consume package. That was when Neckers were quite different, but the shell still exists. The problem is that Wild Hunt Hounds themselves have been power creeps out a little bit. Spawn are good enough in most cases. I don't know if that's fair to say or not, but
I would say it's fairly okay. It's like standard. Like Sirens are a 4-play.
It's
it's
always
no longer strong, basically.
Yeah, it's always going to be really, really variable because it depends not on the relative strength of the card is going to depend on whether or not the meta includes Weather Clear. If it doesn't, then 4 points added onto that many ticks is okay. It's not great, but it's going to get it's going to get the value out. But then everyone starts playing Weather Clear, and suddenly you lose all of that again. So,
Speaking, it's just sort of like the power level of the cards of Wild Hunt at the moment. Of them are generally weaker, than would be ideal.
oh, I remember the question I had now. It was for consume. Going back to the whole. Sorry, no, it wasn't. It was for Death Wish. Going back to the whole playing the weather resources. If you are running.
Your mic's gone.
Yep, that's because I was just trying to think. I can't multitask. If you're running Spirit, I guess that's the one to leave until round 3, because that's the higher tempo play, right?
Well, in theory,
Unless my maths is
You
wrong.
need to consider what side of the coin flip you're on as well, because
Depending
weather
tempo.
effects typically make them is really low tempo. Like you've got to win
Depending,
round 1 if you're investing in it. Sorry, go on.
it's fine. Depending tempo-wise, of course, if you're running like Vadermaker, then Vadermaker is generally a lower point tempo play than Dagon. So if you say had that in hand, you play it before Dagon against say Alchemy, because no targets. Because target for a Viper Witcher is fairly bad when you think about it. Then they've essentially played a 9-point bronze, which is
That's
not
true,
what Alchemy
yeah.
want at all. But if you play Dagon, a 13-point bronze, which is very acceptable.
Can I also add something?
Go for it.
So I just caught up from the tempo and like playing the weather thing. I think you can also consider like to keeping what was it called, the woodland sprint. You can consider things, other things rather than tempo as well. As in, like playing Dagon might make him think that's the only weather you have. So I guess like we can't just consider
Generally,
tempo.
You do also, like, ideally you want to get Dagon out first normally. If tempo's not an issue, then you want to play Dagon. Unless, let's say hypothetically, you're playing a Moonlight deck. And let's say you're playing it against someone who's probably going to have some form of removal. Like, let's say Scoia'tael or Alchemy. So if they're playing Scoia'tael, they've probably got, there's a decent chance that they have Iorveth in hand, for example. And that killing your, like, 6 or 8-point Siren means that you then waste in your Moonlight. So by playing Woodland Spirit instead of Dagon, provided you put the Moonlight on the melee row, which you should always try prioritize generally, first due to that. Because the actual wolves, the Woodland Spirit spawns, are considered beasts, 1-point beasts. Very good synergy with Moonlight. Because then, essentially, instead of just playing, say, a werewolf, like, you could play a werewolf into that fog, sure, but the difference between that and playing Woodland Spirit is that Woodland Spirit's not only playing a fog effect on their side of the board, giving you 2 more points, it's also putting beasts back into your Moonlight, so you're getting both by 1 play. So you're essentially getting 2 more points.
That makes sense.
Oh yeah, looks. I wouldn't suggest running. I really wouldn't suggest running Montat in any deck for that matter.
I wish that card was good again.
Which card?
I don't wish that card was good again. It can stay dead.
Which card?
Montat, the Grave Hag.
Oh,
yeah.
she can stay in our grave.
I remember. I remember when she used to be a good card. How many lost games? I was like, no.
I don't remember. What was it before it changed?
It's always been this way, pretty much. What changed specifically was a lot of the monster cards that like creates units Like, for instance, Arrakis Behemoth created Arrakis, and Harpy, Solano Harpy eggs created Harpies. All of those would just go into your graveyard.
right,
And it would
yeah.
be like normal creatures in your
Yeah.
graveyard. And then it would have like a lot more targets than it does. But now they all have token tag. So they basically banish when they leave the battlefield.
Yeah,
Makes her a lot less
at
strong.
because at that point before they did that, well, she had a target for everything, and then she would be boosted by insanely boosted, and then like she usually ended up being finisher, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She would normally hit like between 25 and 30 points. And
Yeah.
if the monsters player had one card advantage and last play, it was uninteractable. So it won a lot of games, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was
Sounds familiar from somewhere.
Yeah.
Or you could just watch older monster videos on YouTube where that stuff still happened in round 3. And see the horror. Relive the horror. That card. I lost too many games when that card was good. I was like, man, I should just forfeit it. But I'm not gonna do that. So I just pass instead. And I'm like even if I had like 5 cards in hand and then I just see that happening, I'm like, nope,
I'm
there's
out.
nothing I can do. I accept defeat now.
You've won this time.
You win this time, Dwan.
does that card, or what was the name, Montard? Does it consume one by one the units?
I believe
It consumes them all at once. So
I
it
believe
doesn't
it
trigger
can.
neckers more than once.
Ah, okay.
If that's what you're asking.
Yeah, that's a
that'd be
bummer.
pretty OP. I mean, that'd just be like game breaking if you just use that halfway in. You
Yeah.
just got like some 20-point neckers per round
Yeah.
3.
I mean, like,
Yeah,
even if you
awesome.
only got like 10 triggers off it or something, that would still be ridiculously broken in a consume deck.
Yep.
I mean, it would basically make Consume into a near godlike deck if you didn't have the like immediate counters. You'd have to run like Super JJ style decks where you like pull Jade figurine.
I don't know. So sometimes I just
Or
think that like,
Spellatail.
sometimes I think they have this like opinion where consume, like, it wins on points anyway, right? So there's no point. You can just print broken cards for it and it won't make it any more broken, right? It's like
Would
A
be
little
nice
bit
if it
backwards.
got a rework. Consume.
No, I
I
haven't
think it
played
will.
against Consume for such a long time that I can't even talk about it.
consider yourself lucky. Ugh.
That almost sounds like an 70s song. Consider yourself lucky. Do we have any more questions?
Am I a good Gwent player now?
I think
Yes.
so.
Is that how that works?
Hopefully.
You can go hit Grandmaster tonight. Off you go.
Awesome. Bye.
No comment. I'll do the swim
Go
thing.
forth and go forth and conquer. Consume.
I think it's going to have to, like, trying all of this stuff out at this point, probably not on ranked, considering there's only 5 days left, but next season I'll see how it goes, because I need to do something other than reveal Nilfgaard. As much as I love that deck,
It's probably a good time
It's-
to play it on ranked, honestly. Like, if you feel like you're not going to get any higher on ranked over the next 5 days, if you lose MMR, it doesn't matter, and you'll have like the right environment to.
it's actually a very
So
good
try
point.
it out then.
But like, wait until you've got as high as you want to get this season. So maybe
Yeah,
like
for-
hit your next target in terms of a rank, and then.
That's what I've been trying to do for well over a week at this point, and I've just found myself bouncing between 3.3k and 3.5k without being able to hit sixes. At this point, I may as well just try anything.
Yeah.
If you enjoy Squirtle, you can just play the Brotherhood deck.
I don't.
Okay. How about Northern Realms?
That's worse.
Okay.
You're only using reveal Nilfgaard so far?
Well, back when dwarves first thing, I used it because why not? But then since they stopped with what was it that they changed? The dwarven, whichever one it was that used to strengthen and now boosts the bronze unit.
Skirmisher?
The
Yeah.
skirmisher, yeah. When they made that change, I thought, okay, I've stopped farming easy wins now. I'm actually going to try and do some proper deck building. And Reveal Nilfgaard was what came to me easiest, and I find it really fun. I just have fun with it.
Fun.
And
It is fun.
until you hit like 3K, it's actually competitive as well. It's not like a strong 60-70% win rate, but it'll win you enough games to be able to ladder properly.
Yeah.
It's like new players panic when they play against Reveal Nilfgaard.
I
If they like
hate
see the
Reveal-
first round.
I hate it.
Yeah. You see all the tempo in the first round and you're like, holy shit, this deck is unbeatable. And then like
I
you go
think
into
the-
round 3 and they have no more tempo.
They
and
have
you're
like 10 points.
actually I probably could have won this,
I think the problem is that there really is well, I feel like there's no counter to Reveal with unless you're also playing Reveal. The thing is that no other factions. What I mean by that is how in Nilfgaard there's that. I think it's Henry's card. He's the one that you can conceal as many cards as you want
Yeah.
and stuff. Well, no other faction has that, and I mean, there's still ways to play around Reveal, but literally there are no other cards outside of Nilfgaard that you could conceal your deck. Unless I'm playing Scoia'tael and focusing completely on Mulligan, probably my only counter. But other than that,
But
I've had
I mean-
very few situations where Reveal people would panic when they see how many Scorches I had in hand.
I think the thing about Reveal Nilfgaard is it's not about the reveals, if that makes sense. It's about
Yeah.
the strategy that the cards have together, and the reveals are just a tool to point slam, Reveal
Yeah.
Nilfgaard is a point slam deck in round 1 at least. So you're right, it's a really binary deck. In any given meta, it's either going to be good enough or it's not going to be good enough,
good
it's pretty
enough,
simple.
It's not gonna be good
Yeah, I
enough.
understand.
It's probably not going to be good enough, spoiler alert,
Which makes me sad.
I don't know. Imagine if they would print out a card I don't know, maybe a gold. Every time you reveal a unit, boost yourself by 1 or by 2. Then boom, that'll be
Reveal
your
would be
finisher.
unstoppable.
Yep.
Yes.
You heard it here
Fire
first.
Reveal.
That'll be a card.
I mean, it would actually be fine, honestly.
No,
The thing is, because they already have that in Mangonel, right? So
no, but it's different. With Mangana, it's locked to 1 round. Imagine you play your leader and you get 8 points in your finisher. You kill him? It's not fine.
I don't play mangonels anyway.
Oh,
No one ever
should,
sees
though.
that coming. I
That's-
did,
that's
and now the
good,
deck is better without them.
Yeah.
That's the thing. The reveal deck is better without mangonels in it.
that's honestly fair. If your Mangonel gets killed every single time, then it's very bad. It's worse than other cards you could be
Aye.
playing.
Particularly if you're running into a lot of alchemy, say.
Yeah, exactly. Alchemy is very oppressive for
Well,
any engine card like Mangonel.
Alchemy is also just in general brutal against reveal,
Yeah.
particularly if you're running stuff like spotters. Because I played against a reveal player, used the slave driver into their own spotters. So for a grand total of 19 points.
What,
From
against a
slave
hand buff
driver.
deck or something? Or
Yeah, because they were
No.
they revealed their Cantarella to
that's
use
the finisher.
Venendal Elite.
You Venendal Elite, you reveal the Cantarella, Venendal Elite, and then as many spotters as you can throw at it.
Yeah.
So reveal just takes all of them and says, "Nope, these points are mine now."
The thing is, when you play an alchemy player, they just play slave driver and take your spotters and add 1 point to them.
yeah, it's weird. It's the same reason that reveal counts as reveal. Slave Driver, if you time it well enough, you can kind of do that by finding the Venadol Elite on the Cancerella before they do, and then they have a 1-point bronze in hand. Or
But then that goes with my point with whole like Nilfgaard mirror is probably the best counter to like
yeah,
reveal is what I mean, because they at least have the cards to conceal like what's that bronze card a Master of Disguises. It'll conceal
Something
the
like
truth
that.
or something.
The only 2 concealed cards in the game.
I don't know.
Although right now, I mean,
Forgetting.
since Veranda Elite is not like a three of a card, probably
Mhm.
like you couldn't run like more than one and it would be good. Since it's like this right now, I don't think like the fact that like let's say I'm playing monster and I don't have a way to conceal my hand, I don't think it's a problem. I mean,
Yeah.
at least for now. And
Yeah.
let's say like I want to conceal their card, so spoiler. Well, since it's a reveal, like even if I conceal them, they're just gonna reveal them again somehow.
I mean, the best counter. Oh, I mean, I'm sure you all know this and you've all said it, but like, if you can reveal their foot soldiers before they can reveal them,
I had done this over.
it's
Uh,
disgustingly good.
Yeah.
That's why when you're
They kind
playing
of panic.
alchemy, you like normally go for the alchemist and just reveal their hand.
Yeah.
Or, like
I
sometimes
think
you'll
just
win the
because of
game.
that reason, I kind of stopped playing reveal because I really like that as well. But I kind of stopped maybe like a couple months ago, or a
Yeah.
month ago. Oh no, a month ago. But I
This
think
is the
best-
thing. Like, I know, which is why I'm trying to branch out. Like, this is what I had right with the last faction challenge, Northern Realms versus Monsters. I knew I don't have the cards or the skill. I use the term skill to play a Northern Realms deck. No offense meant, by the way. Genuinely.
Oh my god!
Did I miss something then? Is it
Protest name
zoned out?
reporting in.
Anyway, I thought, okay, this is a good opportunity to try Death Wish. But Death Wish only got me so far before it stopped working, and now I'm stuck. So I'm looking for to get more decks to try out and expand my horizons. Otherwise, I'm not going to be able to make it very far.
That's the way to do
I
it.
would suggest alchemy. As strange as that
I
sounds.
hope there's
But
more.
you might struggle with the cards,
Like,
depending on what you have.
I don't know how big your collection is, and I don't know if you like buy packs regularly or whatever, or you do your dailies every day. But like, literally, just play as many decks as you can. Honestly, like, you'd be surprised about how much of a boost it gives you if you can understand what's going on in the meta. And when you look across the table and you see a deck, if you understand what's going on in that deck, like you have so much of an advantage, you know,
I would agree.
if you
with
understand
that.
the matchup. That's the difference between
Yeah.
mid 3K.
It's one of the
MMR
best
player and
ways
a 4K
to
MMR player.
grow as a player. Even decks that you hate, try to do at least a few games with it if you have the cards, just
And
so you
then
understand
basically
what makes
you
it
figure
tick.
out by trial and error.
Yeah,
Like,
and
because if someone beats you, then you'll have a rough idea on how they beat you.
Mhm.
And then you can use that in reverse.
exactly.
And if you can't craft the decks, just go onto Twitch and watch a streamer. And just
Yeah.
like maybe he's playing a deck and you watch him for like 2 or 3 games, understand what's going on, and then move on to a different stream.
Like swim
Really
because
help.
I never
Yeah.
play elves.
Squirtle is good, but I'm also bought. Listen, hold on, wait.
One
but I'm
very
also-
particular part of Scoia'tael is good.
The word of the day is bias, and I'm biased to Squirtle.
Squirtle rocks.
I will
Love
admit,
Squirtle.
Bruva kind of triggers me a little.
I'm using
No.
Spellotel mostly because I mentioned
So
it
fun.
before that triple scorch though somehow is still working
Oof,
for me.
burn the world.
It's so
Is that
satisfying.
so dunny?
One time I was playing against someone and they had 5 11-point bears on the other side. I'm like, man, it'd be a shame. It would be such
Something
a
happened.
shame if something happened to them. Yeah, they
Hmm.
It'd be a shame
forfeited.
if someone were to Scots.
I usually just lightning them
You know,
before
but
they can even go off. I'm like, bye.
See
Enjoy
ya.
rezzing that. the purpose of doing that is basically to get all of their reses out for their greatswords, and
Yeah,
then they
generally speaking,
have nothing. It's
The
an
dream.
XP run.
you
Depends on
tend
the variant,
to
though.
want to target the great swords and not the ships, because they tend to have more resurrects for the ships due to the 3-point pirate guys.
Yeah.
I forget what they're called.
Clan Corsairs.
Yeah, that's the
But
reason
then
why.
essentially,
Yeah, it's better to go after the great swords, because if they waste all their reses, soldiers, then you really don't have to worry about the great swords anymore.
although as a monster, you have cards like Osril and Caretaker. You can
Yeah.
actually potentially let them build up
You lose round,
because
and then you just go first round 3, and they're set.
Yeah.
because generally speaking, you get more value too the more they grow. On which side of the coin flip you're on, of course.
Yeah.
That makes like you having the first say in like round 2 or round 3 can make a big difference depending on first rounds played out.
That's true.
But that means generally you do want to round 1 against greatswords as monsters.
Sounds like generally with monsters, that's always the case.
I mean, almost always it is, but that tends to be the case with a lot of decks. But particularly against like great swords, because you still get a lot of value from eating or resurrecting their Caretaker or Osril.
You mean in round 2 or 3?
But if you let them win round 1 easily, then you won't get that much value from your like your resurrect on Caretaker or your like eating the greatsword with Osril, and they'll sword and probably a lot of engines in the form of the light longships, which will give them generally more points. Go on, Wishy.
Yeah, I have a question generally about Black Blood, because I know it's probably not the most effective, but what I've been seeing recently, what I've been doing is if I'm going against like a monster's mirror, or if I happen to be running it in any other deck or something, I use the destroy feature if I see like a really high point ghoul or something. That's only like desperate round 3.
If you're either running poor man's what's it called? If you're running poor man's Vesemir, when I say that, I mean it's because it's like a slightly worse version of Monsters Tributess.
Oh.
You know, because of course, Black is just a less reliable version of Monster's Nest when you think about it. You know, because on the odd occasion you'll get Osril, which will be slightly better in most cases than the Monster's Nest. You know, like if you just get a ghoul, then it's just 1 point less than a Monster's Nest. In general, it's...
Don't listen to him. But do great.
Basically, you
I've
only would
I've
use
had
it...
hit or miss with Black Blood, so...
You'd probably only use it in, say, Skellige, if you're using, like, Vesemir for the Mandrake. Or you use it in Alchemy. You know, because, of course, Alchemy, it's an Alchemy card. Which can be very important.
The strength of Black Blood that people estimate is its ability to clear weather. A few pools that do that for you, that you can hit pretty reliably at the moment. So it's actually pretty good against like the Monsters Death Wish deck at the moment, and a couple of other things, like any deck that plays Burner Bran. But yeah, if you don't have what you need it for, like clearing weather, the highest value you're probably going to see with it is 16 points if you're lucky. So if you can kill a ghoul that's worth more than 16 points, then that's probably the best use you're going to get out of in that game.
Yeah, because mostly I either draw... Well, it's like a hit or miss card for me, but majority of the time I would use it for weather clear, or I've been just using it for weather clear because at least it's up more reliably recently for me anyway when I'm playing monsters. Like
yeah,
because usually for if I'm playing Consume, I don't have a lot of weather clears anyway. So I'm like, oh, this is like just in case. But I don't put I don't put Abaya. I don't use Abaya. I would like put Black Blood instead, because at least I have the chance of Ozrel too.
Yeah, Black Blood is just so powerful in its flexibility. It's really nice.
Super good card.
Yeah, I'm just gonna keep it then, and I hope it eventually gets a premium.
Yeah.
Along
Yeah,
with
soon,
many other,
eventually.
April.
Soon, TM.
So they say.
along with the other midwinter patch cards that needed premiums. Cough, Sabrina Spectre, cough.
There are a
one
lot of
look-
cards that don't have them yet, right? Like Bone Talisman, Pavko Gale, some other
Yeah.
ones. I don't know.
I just think Sabrina Spectre would look really nice premium.
Yeah, anything with like parts shit going on.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to head off. Thank
All
you.
right.
Thank you for all of the advice. It was very good. I look forward to putting it into action, and you can look forward to me complaining when I still lose.
No.
Complain
on
in the
Pro
group
Ladder
back
next
bug
week,
and
Sure, why not? See you on Pro Ladder next week.
Just go do it.
Right, have a good evening or day wherever you are.
later
You as well.
Lafari.
Take care.
Good
Thanks for
night.
hanging.
So yeah.
See ya.
See you in the cookback bog.